So, as mentioned, we are looking at the roles and responsibilities of. We're gonna look first at the pre-production personnels. What roles and responsibilities do they have? So, zoom into there, minimize that. So in pre-production, we have contract service providers, and we have the list of persons, console developers, software developers. Those persons can be contracted to provide those services. So what is a CSP? It's basically a third-party person or organization with which licensee enters into a written contract for the provision of specific services like testing, contract manufacturing, distribution, and so on. So our first position is the console developers. Alia, you want to read that?
Development teams of designers, artists, and programmers, among others, make video games, where it's the designer's job to dictate how players interact with the game world. The programmer's job is to facilitate that interaction with coding languages. These languages apply to the graphics, the game's mechanics, menus, and everything that happens within the game. Programmers work on multiple consoles and PCs, especially when working for third party developers where games have multi platform releases. Working in games development as a programmer requires a deep understanding of computer science and math.
Good.
Some
You can pause there. Good. So when these persons are working on these consoles, so we're looking at the hardware aspect. So you still got to take into consideration the software aspect, because you have to know how will the software work on the various hardware, and especially if it's a multi-platform game. If it's a game that's gonna run on a computer, it's gonna run on a console, it's gonna run on a phone, it's the same game. You have to know how is it going to run on all of those devices the same way. What do you have to do to make it to be able to run the same way on those devices, on all of those hardware devices? Because it won't be the same hardware. So how are you going to have to modify the software? How might you have to even modify the hardware in order for you to facilitate um, having a good game in order to have a good final product as your output? So among other things you have to consider, some additional points that these game developers have to do. Ariel,
You reading?
you're reading.
Yeah. Assist in executing the QA project test plan by performing thorough testing and assign software titles. This can include functionality, balance, stability, performance, interface, art, sound, text, documentation, and other types of testing. Identifies and documents defects in a clear and concise manner using the assigned bug tracking database. Assist the production and development team in tracking down issues and working out the steps to reproduce so that they are easier to locate and fix. Completes regression and verification testing as needed. Follows instructions and accomplishes tasks as directed by the QA project lead or QA management.
Good. So I took this from basically a job requirement, and what basically this developer responsibility was that they had to test the software, and what they tested it on the hardware, on the console. So they have to test to see its functionality. Will it work? Will it be effective? Will it be stable on the device? Will you get good performance out of it? Um, will the interface appear well on that device? Um, Is the art style good? Is the sound good? All these other aspects. These developers would have to test, not only developing the hardware, they have to test the hardware with the software to ensure that everything is working smoothly. So when they test and they would have find any bugs, they would have a database. They would need to record those bugs in the database. What caused it? Why was it caused? How, when, where, and so on. Documentation, so that it can go back to the software team. They can resolve it on their end, send it back over to the development team, the hardware part, and they can run it once again to see if they get the same issue. So documentation is a part of their responsibility. Testing is a part of their responsibility. Tracking down issues, regression and verification of testing, and so on. Those are their responsibilities. Any comments, questions before we move on developers? Any additional?
No.
No, sir.
All right. So console software developers now. Zane, you could read that.
Software developers researching, designing, implementing, and managing software programs in the animation industry, testing and evaluating new programs, identifying areas for modification in existing programs, and subsequently developing these modifications, writing and implementing efficient code. Responsibilities: design and develop and maintain new features in Presto as part of the software R&D animation team. Work closely with animators and artists during the creative and iterative process of filmmaking. Work on a range of products from small independent efforts to large collaborative projects with other technical teams. Help define the feature requirements for future films during the pre-production process. Partner with researchers to implement experimental technology and explore new and innovative ways to meet the software needs of artists. Present your work to the engineering and animation teams.
Good. So based on what we learned yesterday, when it comes to animation and game design, these companies, what do they like to do in terms of software?
So Disney, for example, they have their own software, and like others would use multiple software in animation.
Good. So the basic idea is that if you're a large scale company or if you're a specialized company, then you would want to have your own software to do tasks in a certain way that you prefer. So that's why you as a company would have a software developer, because you might have your idea of design, you have your idea of how things should be carried out. I like this form of art style, this form of music, this form of production. So you have your own plan, your own idea of how things should go about. Now, regular software that we have that are available commercially, they might not have the tools, the features that you want. So you are going to hire now a software developer who can develop the program in such a way that it functions how you want it to function. So these software developers, they're going to need to know how to do research, how to design, how to implement, how to manage these software that the industry wants, that the animation and game design company wants. So they're gonna have to test the applications, they're gonna have to test the software, evaluate it, ensure it is up to standard, it's doing what it is supposed to do, make any necessary modifications. Because if you notice with these responsibilities here, they were told to work closely with the animators and the artists. Why were they told to do this? Any idea?
So they could develop the software based on the animator's needs.
Exactly, exactly that. So, because remember the animators and the artists, they're going to be working with the software. They're going to be using it to complete their work. And at times, what may happen is that um, they might say that, oh, this is not working smoothly as it should, or it's kind of glitching, or when I try to do this, something else is happening. It's not working as I want it to work, so that I can have a smooth experience when I'm using this software. So when they work together now, they can tell the software developer, look, this is the issue that I'm having. Can you fix it? Can you do something that we can go around it and make the experience much more easier? So that there is a part of their responsibility, their role there. Any questions, comments before we move on? Any additions?
Oh, sir.
No, sir.
All right. Well, these are just requirements of what the person would have needed. Um, what is gaming software? I think I would have added that. Ali, you can read that.
What is gaming software? While games have become visually diverse, most rely on similar versions of pre-built software, commonly referred to as engines. No matter how innovative or creative a new game may be, it will never work without a proper engine, and that's where game software developers come in. These professionals are responsible for the technical side of game design. Whether game designers deal more with the creative aspects of a game, software designers primarily work with programming languages such as C or C++, for example, APIs, which is application programming interfaces, and scripting languages to ensure that the design team's ideas and concepts transition smoothly to the game itself.
Good. So, as the paragraph mentioned, when you're developing a game must have an engine. That's basically the core of the game. How it's going to work, how it's going to function. All the mechanics is based on that. The art style, the animation, everything is based on it. So, that's like how we have Unreal Engine. That is the standard that those persons would follow. So, say for instance, this game or this animation, they don't want to follow Unreal Engine, they can make their own or they can use another standard as they so please. So the game, the software developers, the software designers, that's where they come in to handle that engine, to handle the programming part of the game or the animation. So they're going to be dealing with programming languages such as C, C++, and so on. Whereas the game designers, which is actually one of our roles there, they are responsible for the creative aspects of the game. So designing background, layout, menus, and those kind of things. How do you continue reading?
As well as refined skills in computer science or software engineering for games, game software developers also need a knack for teamwork and problem solving, as they are often required to liaise with different teams to ensure that all parties working on the same project are on the same page. Other important duties in most video game software developer jobs include selecting the most fitting programming language in which to write the code of a video game, regularly running software tests, fixing potential errors and bugs, coordinating their team's activities with other departments, and ensuring deadlines are met.
Good. So almost all of these positions, you must be able to know how to collaborate, how to work along with persons. Because remember, you're not the only person working on this project, this animation or this game. So you need to know how to work along with persons. Because the software developer would need to know how to work along with the console developer, the hardware developer. So that When they are developing their software, they can send it over to that department, tell them that this is the newer version, try it out, and then that department is going to test it, see how it's running, report any bugs, send it back to the software department, and they go back and forth like that. So collaboration, doesn't matter what department you're in, it's very important skill that we must have. Um, Knowing what programming language to use, how to report bugs, how to test, and all of those things. Any comments or questions before we move on? Alright, tool developers now. Ariel.
What does a tool engineer do? Tool engineers make the life of game designers, artists, and programmers easier by giving them the best tools for the job. Some of the time, the tools, software programs used by games developers are bought off the shelf, but it's also necessary to have purpose-built software designed specifically for the creation of a particular game. Tools engineers are responsible for creating and maintaining those tools, whether they be for the game engine itself or the 3D art suite. They also work with programmers, artists, and designers to figure out what tools to build, explain how they would be used, and monitor their effectiveness. What is a tools engineer good at? Communication. Work with team members to identify the requirements, teach them how to use the new tools, create detailed documentation, and submit reports explaining what they have done. Programming or software engineer. Write strong code that's adaptable and easily understood by fellow coders. Knowledge of games, the engines, and platforms. Understand the programming constraints of games, consoles, PCs, handhelds, and mobiles. Innovation. Imagine ways of solving the problems experienced by team members. Time management. Stick to a strict schedule in the game's development. Who does a tool engineer work with? Oh, wait, no, there's a different. Oh my gosh. Who does a tool engineer work with? A tool engineer works closely with programmers, designers, and artists to create the tools to meet their needs.
Good. So, as mentioned already, tools are basically what you are going to need to carry out your everyday tasks in the animation or the game design. So, if it's a tool to maybe edit audio or to draw, then that's going to be a software tool. Or it might be some sort of hardware tool that can be used to test audio or to test sort of aspect of the software and so on. So the tool developers, their responsibility is to create different tools that would be useful in animation and game design. So it's similar to the software developer. But does the tools cover basically a more broader requirements for animation and game design? And the skills, once again, you need to be able to communicate. You need to be able to know how to do programming, how to work with software engines and so on, different platforms, how to think critically, how to manage your time, and so on. If you guys need to go, let me know, but I just want to finish off these areas for today before we basically do nothing and then work starts building up. So, game designers, Zane.
Animation design is the art of creating special effects and other designs for various forms of media, including video games, movies, and even social media posts. Much of an animation designer's work is done with specialized computer software, and some even write their own code. Game designers. Game designers are responsible for both the foundation and execution of game mechanics, overall user experience. Depending on the studio or production company, a video game designer's role can encompass different responsibilities. For large studios, the video game designer is an introductory level design position that focuses on designing a handful of stages for the game.
So any designer, animation or game is basically for the scene, the overall scene. Either the characters or the background or the menu, the different stages, the different elements, the icons that might appear, the characters in the background, things like that. So they are responsible for those designs and more. What does a game designer do? Um, Zane, you want to continue there?
What does a game designer do? Video game designers are responsible for developing a video game storyline, characters, and dialogue. Along with the rest of the video game development team, designers also help set the rules of the game. Designers map out the game and with flowcharts, mockups, and detailed layouts that showcase how all of the game's elements work in tandem. Designers determine the difficulty of gameplay, as well as the type of obstacles the player will encounter. Game designers blend the story with the environment, collaborating with other team members like game artists to get the right visuals, and with sound engineers create the right ambience and effects.
Good. So as mentioned, their responsibility is to design the overall story of the game, to plan the story of the game. So in digital media, we're gonna learn about flowcharts, mockups, and so on. Creating storyboards. It's basically like a rough draft of what the overall story or the direction of the animation is going to be in, so that you get a idea of what it's going to be. So when you get into designing now, you have an idea as to what you are going about doing. So that's their responsibility as designers. Any comments or questions before we move on?
No, sir.
All right. So next we have animators. Alia.
An animator is an artist who is involved in creating animated cartoons. Their job description are animates realistic, story-driven character actions that are exciting, emotional, and compelling. Animates creatures, props, vehicles, and camera, as well as actions based on storyboards, script pages, or descriptions. They create scene layouts using a library of assets, composes and animates cameras in a cinematic way. They works closely with 3D artists and leads and the animation supervisor to ensure the client's requirements are met. Works under guidance of the senior 3D artist to grow and develop the business, as well as implement working methodologies, manage large projects, and coordinate the visual effects output and quality control. And they also work with the lead animator to ensure time completion of character assets at the desired quality bar, and serves as an active participant in the team, our discussions, critiques, and reviews.
Good. So that should be straightforward. There we already know what is an animator. They are persons that make the animation. They make the objects move. They make the characters move. So their responsibility is to ensure that it is portrayed correctly, it is portrayed effectively, and it is portrayed in such a way that it is natural. So that the more natural it is, the more we'll be able to basically enjoy the animation rather than it being something that is, we can typically say that, oh, this is something that it doesn't look so realistic. Alright, so a script writer now, Ariel.
A video game scriptwriter has the job of not just creating a story for a game, but explaining the environments, characters, Details of different scenes, music, hearing the echo. Anyway, sound, even triggers and possible actions. Scriptwriting in film industry. Scripters or screenwriters are the individuals who produce the right blueprints used to create beloved and sometimes hated movies, television shows, and so much more. Scriptwriters are usually contracted freelancers who typically start in the script writing business, writing a speculation or, as it's more commonly known, spec. A spec script is a screenplay written to be sold as opposed to one commissioned by a studio or production company. This means the writer has not been hired to write the script, nor will they be paid unless it sells. Screenwriters are usually considered professional until they have sold something and are represented by an agent.
Good. So the script writer, you can say they work with the designer because the designer has to animate design the scene, the characters, and so on. So the script writer now, the designer can work with the script writer to know how to design the character, how to design the scene, because that's the script writer's responsibility. So explain how the environment is gonna look, how the characters are gonna look. Yes, somebody's gonna design the character, but the script writer is gonna say if the character is sad, if the character is happy, if they're angry, if they went into accident or they got knocked down, how are they supposed to look, and so on. What the different scenes are supposed to be, what music or background song is supposed to play. All of those things are the responsibilities of the script writer. Just like if they're telling the story that must happen, and the designer now is going to look at that story and come up with the overall design there. I'm not seeing any link for this last part there. Alright, so the last one we have sound engineer. What is their responsibilities then?
Sound engineer. The audio engineer is responsible for adding realism to the in-game world of sound. Every game has its own reality and identity, and the audio engineer needs to be able to understand and encapsulate the game's essence in the audio they produce. That includes blending dynamic sound effects with ambient sounds and background music to bring life to the game's world, but it's hardly limited to such. Sound engineer responsibilities. Meeting with clients to determine the requirements and specifications of recordings or performances. Safely setting up, repairing, servicing, and replacing equipment when required. Manipulating and enhancing live and recording audio. Diagnosing and troubleshooting equipment. Understanding briefs and making useful suggestions if possible and appropriate. Editing and mixing audio to client specification. Improvising props to produce required sound. Keeping abreast of advancements in the field through ongoing training and networking with others in the industry. Building solid and professional relationships with other artists and clients.
Good. So the sound engineer, would you guys play a game or watch an animation without any sound?
Nope.
Nope.
No. Even if one does exist, it will not be appealing. It will not be something that a person would enjoy. So any game you play, you're gonna always notice that it has a soundtrack that makes it unique from other games, that makes it special. That you just gotta hear the soundtrack, you know it belongs to this game. For example, Mario, Pokemon. You just gotta hear the soundtrack and you know the game that it is referring to. So that's the purpose of the sound engineer. So create this kind of audio, this sound that will capture persons as they play the game, as they are looking at the animation. Like for example, when you're looking at anime and in Naruto or My Hero Academia, when that soundtrack comes on, that a sad scene is supposed to happen, something sad is gonna happen, or something more exciting is supposed to happen. How do you guys feel when you hear those soundtracks?
In anime or in general.
Either anyone you want to talk about.
Feel sad obviously because, especially if somebody like gonna die.
Yeah, you feel that impact, right? Just
Yeah.
just because of the audio. Nothing happened as yet, but you just hear that audio come on, and that is enough to push you off the edge. So that's the purpose of the sound engineer, to have that effect on you. And obviously, in order for them to reach that stage, they have to know how to communicate with other persons, how to do editing, and how to use the different equipment, softwares, and all of those things there. But their main goal is to produce that sound with that audio for that product. All right, so we looked at the pre-production roles and responsibilities. So tomorrow we are going to look at the post-production. So we didn't look at this term pre-production. Anybody know what pre-production means?
Isn't that like planning?
Yeah, but in general, what does it mean?
We want to be like getting all the necessary tools and equipment or resources
Mm-hmm.
before you actually start the production.
It's from what stage to what stage?
Planning, yeah,
Where does it,
planning to implementation or something like that.
yes, the implementation, or basically when you would have finished completing the product. So pre-production is from that initial stage of you thinking that, look, I want to develop this product, all the way to actually developing the product. That's pre-production. So you're in that production stage. That's when you're actually creating it. You're gonna finalize it, and post-production now is anything beyond creating that content. So any final editing, any modifications, any small bug fixes, um, the shipping it out to customers, publishing it on a website, or so on. Those are all post productions. So tomorrow we're going to look at some additional post productions. Now, once again, the Google Doc, you can save a copy of it, but I'm going to review it. And when I finalize a final copy, I'm going to put it into the classroom. Alright, so if you guys don't have any questions on anything we looked at today, we shall end here for today.